you guys all know that relationships have changed significantly in recent decades with the emergence of all this technology. There are so many different opportunities to cheat on your significant other, so it's becoming more and more difficult for people to commit to their relationships. In fact, in 2012, about 50 to 60% of relationships, or marriages I should say, ended in divorce. So what does this mean for all of us? Everyone is buzzing about the Anthony Weiner scandal. No one can believe that a year after he resigned because of his sexting scandal, he did it again. So what is this? Is this something that a few people fall victim to, or is this something that we're all tempted by? And I want to have a discussion about that. Now, Dave, first question goes to you. I think that we're noticing a change in terms of the types of relationships that we are accepting. We're more accepting of the LGBT community in the liberal areas of the country, and a lot of Republicans would make the argument that that is ruining the sanctity of marriage, and that's redefining marriage. And what would your response be to that?
I mean, that's crazy. Should I continue? Yeah, I mean, that's completely insane. There's not any evidence that if a gay couple gets married, that if you're straight and your marriage is hanging on by a thread like that, you got other problems than the gay couple that moved in next door. Actually, if a gay couple moves in next door, they probably do some nice things with their house, and that helps your house prices go up, and then you can sell your house at a higher rate and move to another area where they're not as tolerant of gay people. So it's really win-win for the economy, gay people, and straight people.
Absolutely. John, I want to address, you know, the online aspect of relationships and how it's changing. Do you feel that the internet is making it more and more difficult for people to remain faithful and monogamous?
I don't know about making it more difficult to remain faithful, just because prior to the internet we had more than enough opportunities to cheat if we wanted to. I mean, you don't, like business trips, the stereotypical, like bars and things like that. I think that if you wanted to cheat, you do. And I think that historically, if you read books like Sex at Dawn, it shows that we have been for hundreds of thousands of years over the course of our evolution. So I don't know that that's changing it. It certainly looks different, and it's much easier to track, I think, in some ways, even without the NSA releasing all of the sexting photos and things like that. I do think it's interesting. I have multiple different areas in this that I hope that we get to.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. Okay, well, you are more than free to propose a
change
in topic.
Yeah, here's one thing that I want to talk about.
Direction.
So, it says in the notes here, are we experiencing a shift? And I don't know that that's how I'd characterize it, because that implies that we're at a place and we're going to another place. I think that we're experiencing a massive, like a fragmentation, actually, of relationships. We have so much information about the people we are dating, about the people we want to date. We have so much access to advice on how do I go about doing this thing, what's a good sexual position. All of it's being cast at us. Most of the people providing the information don't know what they're talking about, and I don't think that our brains have evolved in a way that we can integrate and use in a useful fashion all this information. I don't know that we are prepared to exist in the modern dating and sexual world. And I think,
and also on top of that, I would say that our culture hasn't changed either. You know, when you still look at the romantic relationships as they're portrayed in movies and in books and on TV, it's still this sort of ancient idea of there's one great person for you, one right person for you, or these concepts, you know, that we have that are still perpetuated that through, you know, gender stereotyping and other types of roles that we have that are sort of ingrained socially. But our culture hasn't kept up with that either, except here we have this whole area on the internet, the digital media explosion, where people have more access to more pornography, for example, or even more of these alternative ideas. So it's very interesting.
Yeah, I think your original question was, does this cause actual cheating in the real world? I mean, I'm a firm believer that video games don't cause violence, and that I don't think necessarily online sex or watching porn is going to make you act out in the real world. If anything, it actually does the reverse. You get the release, so you're not pent up with all that stuff, and then you don't necessarily have to act out, where before you were walking around with all this sexual frustration, and then you maybe would act out.
So I'm actually in favor of allowing my significant other I'm okay with my significant other watching porn if we're in a relationship, because I agree with you. I think that that release is important. It helps keep things spicy, and so I don't think we're meant to have sex with the same person for the rest of our lives. That's a societal expectation, and it's difficult to stick to that. So of course infidelity is inevitable. Okay, inevitable is a little unfair. Some people do remain faithful for their entire marriage, which is amazing. But what I do want to bring up is how the internet has created this avenue for infidelity, not necessarily through porn, but through websites like Ashley Madison. This morning I was jogging around my neighborhood, and there was this huge billboard that said, over 10 million served, you know, kind of playing off the McDonald's billboards. And I thought about that for a second.
Served with divorce papers, I assume?
Served with someone that they can have an affair with while they're in a marriage. And that kind of made me feel discouraged. Because I do believe that people are as faithful as their opportunities. And now all of a sudden there's this interesting opportunity for people to be unfaithful.
I mean, the thing is, you can't stop progress. So like, look, there's Grindr, which most everybody knows at this point is this GPS-based thing. It's for gay guys, but now there's Timber or something, or Tinder. Tinder for straight people, which I'm pretty sure it's just all straight guys and one very sore woman. But you know, that stuff is going to exist. It's what you do with it. There's nothing we can do to stop that stuff from existing. We're all going to always have our phones and GPS. It's all going to exist. And it's a matter of, can you walk down the block and not open an app and be like, oh, I can get a blowjob, you know, a block away. That's your personal choice as a human.
Yeah.
One way that it might be changing things is if sites like Ashley Madison, like they're still relatively new, like maybe 5 years old at this point, and there will be more, if those are around for so long that they create sort of a social acceptability of cheating that hasn't previously been around. Like we sort of expect or understand that people will cheat, but that doesn't mean that we think it's okay necessarily. We might be willing to deal with it, especially once you've been married for 10 or 20 years and you understand that certain things just have to happen. But I think another
what kind of things have to happen? Can you elaborate?
Cheating, apparently. I mean, we talk about how, you know, divorce rates are higher now. That doesn't mean that people weren't giving each other cause for divorce in the past. They just weren't getting divorced. They were living in relationships that might contain infidelity. I think that's been around for a long time. My main problem with, you know, we have the online dating, which gives us access to more information about people. We have Ashley Madison that allows us to cheat if we want to. We have all of these new opportunities, and I think that we falsely believe that they will provide us with more happiness in the end. Like, I have this urge to watch porn. Porn will make me happy. I want to know that the person I'm going to end up with likes the same TV shows as I do and all this stuff. That will make me happy. I think that I don't think that that's correct. I think that's the problem.
Well, I think it's also a fascinating divide between, you know, what our expectations are, you know, this sort of fragmenting, as you called it, of relationships, because, you know, we're both more in contact with more people online, but we're actually more isolated in person and in meet space, you know, with individuals. So I think it's going to be a fascinating way to see how it's going to evolve over time, because then when you look at millennials who are raised on the internet and have a different approach to relationships now, as far at least as when I talk to teenagers about the way that they go about establishing relationships and the hookup culture. I mean, this is, you know, worlds apart from what I would say even 10, 15 years ago teenagers were dealing with. So, you know, how that is going to influence their relationships when teens today get into their 20s, their 30s, their 40s, their 50s, you know, how is that going to change their expectations of what relationships over the long term are?
But isn't it just progress, though? I think it's just evolution and progress. Whether it's up to us how we use all of it, but it's all going to be there and keep changing. So whether it's worse, well, that depends on how you use it. But in and of itself, I don't know that we can make a judgment call on it. Like
how do you feel about the unlimited information that people can look up about you on the internet? I mean, that definitely has an impact on how relationships are formed. And, you know, as someone who is newly single, like, I worry about what someone is going to think about me if I want to date them. They're going to look me up. They're probably going to come across segments like this where I talk about my thoughts on infidelity, and it's kind of scary. You know, it's unlimited information about my personal life and what I think, my perspective. I mean, do you think that that's a good thing or a bad thing for relationships?
Well, the four of us sitting at this table, we all live in a world where we particularly put it out in a overexposed way, and we volunteer that information. But I think the bigger issue is that for people that think, if there's anyone left on Earth that thinks that their stuff is private or semi-private, or really that only the 5 people they've accepted on Facebook are actually, you know, have access to the information. If those people exist, that's where the problem is. But most people, I think, at this point, are now starting to understand that anything you put out there is pretty much, it's just out there, and people are going to find things out. And maybe in a weird way, it'll help relationships because you won't have that much, there won't be that much exculpatory evidence when you're on a date. You know what I mean? It'll just be out there, and you'll be able to get to honesty a little quicker.
Yeah,
I guess that's an upside.
Yeah, that would be an upside to me. That, you know, granted, there's going to be that rough that rough period where people can sort of see how you feel or think about stuff that you might not have been ready to reveal or talk about. But it can also jump over certain stages where you find, oh, I completely disagree with this person on very basic political attitudes. This is never going to work, and that was a waste of time. You know, so you can get past those. So maybe in the long run, it's a better way to filter out. But it can also have short-term implications and impacts on folks that might be judging you incorrectly based on what they think they understood of what you read, even if that wasn't necessarily what you said or what you meant.
To completely argue with myself, though, it might ruin a little something. Like, there's something nice about being on a date with someone and finding out after months that you have the same favorite movie or something like that, where now it's like, here's everything I love, and you love the exact same thing, so we should be together. So you might lose a little romanticism, I suppose, or something like that.
Well, that sucks.
And I think, and again, to go back to what I said before, like, I also look for those same sorts of things, like, oh, she likes Battlestar Galactica too. That means we're meant for each other. When I think that maybe we've been led to believe those things because in romantic movies and stuff, like, oh, they love the same music and everything.
Yeah.
But I don't think that relationships thrive or fail based on liking the same, like in Seinfeld. It's how do you argue? How do you deal with problems that come up? That sort of thing.
You could be in a very passionate, exciting relationship with someone who's the opposite of you, someone who has different beliefs. I mean, I definitely have no interest in someone who has like right-wing conservative beliefs, but someone who doesn't like the same movies as me or doesn't like the same, you know, I was going to say physical activities, but that's true. Physical activities as me, like I'm talking about hiking and stuff like that.
Yeah, just hiking. Yeah, they have to love hiking. She loves hiking.
Right. Conversely, doesn't like when you meet someone and then you can't find anything online, doesn't that make you sort of like, what the hell is this person about? Why don't they have anything out there? I think that's sort of weird. But I think that as we get used to, as we grow, like the people that are 10 now are growing up in a world where there's always been information about everyone, I think that we'll get used to it. It's like when you find out that restaurants have kind of nasty kitchens, eventually you still have to eat. So I think that we will get used to it.
So
with
you'll eat the nasty
people.
kitchens.
Exactly.
Like you'll settle.
Yes, exactly. And the nasty people. Yeah.
So eventually we'll work our way through these bumps and changing relationships and figure out, you know, okay, this doesn't matter so much as that does.
Yeah.
But, you know, I do have a concern about that, you know, over time, that if you aren't able to actually, say, filter out someone who's got mental health issues, you know, you're not going to have that option necessarily online unless, you know, if they're really good at hiding it. So you can't really, you know, it's a double-edged sword, I guess.
Desi, what do you think about the whole Anthony Weiner scandal? I mean, do you see the sexting as infidelity? I mean, if he hasn't met with these women, and as far as we know, he hasn't met with these women. He was just so narcissistic that he had to send pictures of his penis to them. But would you consider that cheating?
Well, I think it would depend on the relationship. You know, you have to assume that within the relationship that those two people have they established those boundaries for themselves? So if within their relationship that boundary was established that, no, you know, I consider it cheating, emotional cheating on a relationship, if you're going to be having this offline relationship, you know, that is something that people should be talking about with their significant others and establishing that definition. Hey, I'm okay with that, or I'm not okay with that, and then that's where the boundary of infidelity would be drawn between those individuals.
Yeah, I think communication is everything.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't make that communication. You know, they don't think about those things until it's already too late. But, you know, there's probably also a pretty good rule of thumb. You know, if your significant other was looking over your shoulder, would you be doing that? Would they be okay with that? Then you probably know what we didn't talk about this, but that's probably where your boundary is.
If it involves your penis, it's probably cheating.
Probably, but
you're so reasonable.
Well, you
I
never
think it's
know.
so clearly cheating.
Know.
She should look. I think he should be able to run for mayor, and I think people should vote for him because I think it has absolutely nothing to do with politics. But I think Huma should divorce him, obviously.
Don't you think he lacks self-control, though? I mean, that was what led to his downfall.
But show me proof that sort of self-control is the same sort of self-control that would apply to politics.
Remember, when the story first broke, he denied. He said that his Twitter account had been hacked. He actually spent public money to investigate the hacking. No, he should not be, like, no one should vote for him. I think that that's wrong. Like, that is a terrible use of public funds.
But isn't by caring about it in the first place, aren't we sort of forcing him to respond in some sort of way? Of course he's going to deny it. Everyone would deny it. That's very human.
If he had come out and said, that's right, I sexted my penis, and I shouldn't have done that, but I did,
Except that
and
he
I
lives in America.
apologize, and I'm not going to resign. No, if I were him, I wouldn't have resigned in the first place, and I certainly wouldn't have lied, and I wouldn't have used public funds to investigate the so-called hacking.
Right.
So.
I think you can find out far more from his character about his character from the lie than the penis picture, because this is a generational thing. You know, Bob Schieffer was on CBS the other day saying that him sending these pictures, it's like the peeping Tom or the guy that walks around in a raincoat exposing himself all the time. But it's really a terrible comparison, because there are millions and millions of people with webcams on their camera that have gotten naked and Skyped with someone or sent a picture to someone. There weren't millions and millions of people running around with raincoats exposing themselves when that was hot, I guess maybe in the early 80s or something. I don't know, picturing a guy in Times Square running around doing that. But there weren't millions and millions of people doing it. There were some weirdos doing it. But now everyone's doing it. That's not excusing Anthony Weiner by any stretch, but it is something that is happening. So in a weird way, I think this is kind of cathartic that him running and Spitzer running, and this weirdo in San Diego, like, we're getting out some of our sexual repression and all that. Yeah.
You're totally right about that. I mean, I would also say that I think that when Weiner does this and does not, and says he stopped doing it and then starts doing it again, knowing the consequences that could happen to him professionally, politically, and personally, the problem that I have with it is that it calls into question his judgment. You know, his judgment and his ability to control his impulses.
But he did say more pictures might come out, so he didn't really deny that this could possibly happen.
Right, but then he kept doing it, and he launched a new version of it after he said that. So it wasn't like, hey, this is what I did in the past, and somebody might reveal some more of the things I did in the past. This was a new action that he took.
More pictures might come out because I will continue doing this.
Because I haven't learned my lesson, and my judgment is in question.
He's honest with himself about the sort of person he is. No, I don't know.
I don't think he actually is honest with
I
himself.
think that the worst thing about this is that we've been revealed, it's been revealed to us again that he's a human. And most humans do stuff like this. They might not spend taxpayer money to investigate it, but they have picadillos like sending photos and stuff like that.
Right, but then does he step into where we get with San Diego Mayor, was it Filner, who is now being, not prosecuted yet, but investigated for some really extreme sexual harassment at the workplace. So at what point does something that what Weiner does, which is just women we don't know, and they're not working with him, do we have to be concerned about it crossing over into the professional harassment space?
Yeah.